This is my 161st video on my work with OO gauge. See part 1 of this series for my reasons for getting into OO gauge when I already had a lot invested in working in N gauge and I didn't really have space available for a large, fully operational OO gauge layout. Also see my series on my N gauge railway modelling for smaller and more complex scenery and smaller scale trains running. This part is my first dealing with actual Hornby Dublo 3-rail models. I talked about my decision to go ahead with obtaining and running some Dublo 3-rail in the teaser that I posted last week as part 159 of this series. With some of the material I bought now starting to arrive, I'm starting to actually get my hands on 3-rail models and trying to run them. As I said in my teaser, this is going to be strictly a tabletop exercise. I just don't have room for another full layout, even something as small as 8 foot by 4 foot. But Hornby Dublo was marketed from the very first as the perfect tabletop railway, so I'm going to go ahead and see what I can do on a tabletop. Specifically the tabletop seen here. A 6 foot by 2 foot 5 inch folding table from Canadian Tire, expanded out to 6 foot by 3 foot 4 inches with foam matting, which I've now determined is going to get some additional reinforcement in the very near future, in fact hopefully later today. In this video, I won't even be using all of that space, as I'm only going to be dealing specifically with the Duchess of Atholl 3-rail train set, which only comes with a simple oval of track. I was quite excited when this finally arrived. There was something special for me about unpacking the shipping box and taking out this original old Hornby box, somewhat the worse for wear though it is, not surprisingly. The Duchess of Atholl set was announced just before World War II broke out, but of course the outbreak of war changed everything. Hornby production went on hold with the factory repurposed to war work, and the Duchess of Atholl set never actually got into production at that point. It was 1947 before Hornby Dublo production resumed, and the Duchess of Atholl set finally went on the market. Here's a bit of a closer view of the contents of the set in the box. Coronation class loco, Duchess of Atholl, 2 LMS corridor coaches, 1 composite and 1 brake third. Standard 3-rail curved and straight track sections enough to make a simple oval and a speed controller. Here's the track as it came to me. This track has the earlier small connection tabs. I believe there would originally have been an oil bottle in that little space below the curved tracks. Here's the brake coach and the locomotive tender. Note that it says Hornby Dublo electric train. When initially produced in the 1930s, Hornby Dublo trains were available in both electric and clockwork versions. I don't believe that production of OO-scale clockwork versions resumed after the war. Nevertheless, they felt it worth labelling this as an electric train. It's also probably worth mentioning that essentially it was Hornby Dublo that established OO as the predominant scale for model trains in Britain and established 12-volt DC operation as the standard. Here are the other coach, the composite and the loco itself. This set uses simplex couplings, which were developed by Sidney Pritchard in 1946, and on the basis of which he founded the Pritchard Patent Products Company, better known to us all as PICO. I believe that all Hornby Dublo stock made after production resumed in the 40s used simplex couplings, first the metal type seen here and later plastic couplings to the same basic design. Here's a close-up of the loco itself, still in its box, though it was wrapped in tissue paper for shipping to me, and I've removed that. Underneath the Duchess of Atholl nameplate, there's a long rectangular lug sticking out from the side of the boiler. That reflects an error that Hornby made in their early castings. There should actually be a groove there going in, not a lug sticking out. This error was corrected in later Dublo versions of Coronation-class models. I don't honestly know the full details of this, but I do know that this is referred to as the cast lug error version. The loco model, the Duchess of Atholl, was built for the LMS in 1938 and was one of the first batch of Coronation-class locos built from the first without streamlining. although streamlined and non-streamlined versions were all considered to be part of the same class by the LMS. This loco was also finished in LMS Crimson livery when it first went into service, so this model is accurate as regards the basics of its prototype. I got the loco model into my servicing cradle for some initial testing and cleaning. I didn't do a lot at this point, but I did clean the wheels and the central pickups. I was relieved to find that the model did operate in both directions, although it required quite a lot of power to be applied to get the wheels to turn at a decent speed. I returned the rolling stock to the tabletop. The loco is in, as they say, rather play-worn condition. I haven't decided if I'm going to try to do anything about that. I might try touching up the paint on the cylinders at some point, at least. The coaches didn't appear to be terribly worn. Here's the composite. And here's the brake. The glazing of these is in better condition than it often is on these very old coach models. This is the part of the box that held the track. The floor of the section holding the straights is rather sneakily raised so that when things are in the box it looks as though you're getting more straight track than is in fact the case. The set actually came with 8 curved sections and just 2 straights, one of which is the power feed track, although curved power feed tracks were also made in Dublo 3-rail. 8 full 3-rail curved sections make up a circle, so the track here will make up an oval with 1 straight section just under 12 inches on each side. 3-rail curves initially only came in 1 radius, 15-inch radius to the centre of the track, meaning that a semicircle of curves would be about 31.5 inches across to the outside of the tracks. This is the controller that came with the set. I don't think that I'll be attempting to make any use of this. This controller was not designed to be connected directly to the mains electricity. Rather, input was expected from a transformer, or possibly a battery. Apparently the required transformer was not included with the set. I'm not sure about that. I'm also not sure exactly what voltage is supposed to be input to the controller, as it's not marked. Perhaps 12, I'm not sure. This controller doesn't look as though it's in the best shape, as you can see here, so it's just as well I won't be trying to use it. This is the other side of the controller with the connection for wires going to the track. The controller did come to me with wires attached to it, presumably those with which it was last used, who knows how long ago. I plan to use a Hammond & Morgan Duet controller with my Dublo 3-rail. The Duet that I have is one that was specially adapted for sale in the Canadian market and is properly set up to work with Canadian mains voltage. As you can see, it is labelled for 120 volt 60 cycle input on the front there and marked by the Canadian Standards Association. I stripped and tinned the ends of a section of double wire and used it to connect the output from one side of the Duet to the screw terminals on the Dublo power track. I set up the oval of track that came with the set, trying to get it as flat and well joined as I could. I didn't initially do anything else to the track. However, when I tried the loco on the track like that, I basically couldn't get it to move at all. If I pressed it and wiggled it on the track, there was obviously a bit of life, but it wouldn't actually run. So I cleaned the track. I didn't want to use anything too abrasive, but I figured that something with a bit of rubbing power would be required to remove the accumulation of the ages. I folded a piece of ultra-fine grit, 600 grit, emery paper round a block of wood, and ran that all round the tracks, making sure that it also got the centre rail. With that done, I was finally able to get the loco to run round the oval of track, although it did require quite a bit of power. So, here's the Duchess of Atholl 3-rail set up. Now, I did try it, well, no, the first thing I did was got the loco into a cradle and cleaned its wheels and contacts, but I haven't done much more in the way of servicing the loco yet. And I did run, it would run with about 80% power or so in the servicing cradle from that controller. Then I laid the track. I didn't initially do anything to restore the track. I know I need to do some work on the track, but initially I didn't. I just wanted to see what happened. I laid this oval of track, which is what comes with the Duchess of Atholl train set. When I put power to it from the duet controller I've got down there, I've got the duet set on the high level, naturally enough for this, because this needs quite a lot of power. The duet has a high level or a low level. And I've got it set on full rectification, the duet, so I'm not using half wave. I could hardly get the loco to move at all. Well, I had to sort of press it down and move it backwards and forth. There obviously was some power there, but so I've cleaned the track using some very fine. I mean, this is like insanely fine. It's like, what is it, 600 grit. I think it's 600. Does it say on it? Yes, 600 grit. So very, very fine emery paper on a block of wood. And I've gone round and cleaned the rails with that. And I think I can just about get the loco to run now, but I'm not going to run it much because I'm having to use a lot of power. I want to get the loco remagnetized and service it more, but I will try to just get it to move. There's no handheld controller here, unfortunately, so I got to bend down to turn the controller up. See, and that's almost full power, so I'm not going to run it for long because I don't think it's very good for the loco. But it is running now. I've cleaned the track. If anything, it runs a little bit better in reverse than forwards, I think. In fact, I'm saying forwards, but yeah, I think it does for some reason run a little. That's a bit less power than I had on it going forwards. So it seems to prefer, for some reason, running backwards to running forwards. Well, anyway, there you are. The very, very first three-rail running for me, Hornby Dublo three-rail running. But I'm not going to run it much at this point because I want to service and remagnetize the... Well, I can't remagnetize. I don't know how to remagnetize. I'm going to take it up, get Nigel at British Model Trains to remagnetize it. But there we go. I'm not going to... Whoops, sorry. I'm not going to hook the carriages up to the train at this point, you know, because, as I say, I've got the two carriages that came with this set there, which is frankly plenty on this little oval. I've also actually got 3 more of those LMS carriages, which I've changed the wheels on so they can run on 2-rail track. But that's all I'm going to do for now because, as I say, I don't think it's particularly good for the loco running it at such a high power level. I think, you know, hopefully if we service it and get it remagnetized, we should be able to run it at a lower power level. It'll be kinder to it.
Well, I took the loco up to Nigel with British Model Trains in Cambridge, Ontario, just up the road from where I live, and he remagnetized it using his Dodds magnetizer. I'm not even really sure that was required, as the magnet seemed fairly strong as I got it, but anyhow, the magnet is now really nice and strong. This didn't really seem to result in much improvement in the running of the loco, so I got it onto the bench for a full servicing. I started by removing the bogie and the pony truck. I took the chassis out of the body. The odd thing was that the motor seemed to run fine, even with quite little power, when power was applied directly to the brushes, or even when power was applied to the chassis and the inside of the central pickup. But lots of power was required to get the loco to run by applying power to the wheels and the central pickup, so clearly there was some problem with power getting through to the motor from where it was picked up. I held the pickups out with the handle of a paintbrush and thoroughly polished them up with emery paper. It seemed to me that the biggest problem was with power getting from the wheels to the chassis. If I applied power to the central pickup and the chassis, the motor ran fine with 50% power, but to get it to run with power applied to the wheels took almost 80%. I figured this must be because of guck between the wheels and the chassis and on the axles. And indeed there did appear to be all sorts of guck there, sort of black muck mixed with oil.
I really didn't want to get into taking the wheels off an old model like this, so many potential dangers there. So I first tried to clean the axles with thread passed round. Then I resorted to using a folded paper towel soaked in 99% isopropyl alcohol. As you can see, this removed lots of guck, and guck kept coming out like this through the application of several paper towels. I also removed the brushes and cleaned the brushes and the commutator. I checked the adjustment of the bearing on the top of the motor, making sure that the armature had an appropriate little bit of play when cold. I lubricated the top and bottom bearings of the motor. Here are the bits in my work tray: the front body retaining bolt and nut, the tender drawbar, the brushes and springs, and the back brush cap. The little couplings are from a kit I was building before. The little buffers, that is. I reassembled the motor, but didn't refit the bogie and pony truck at this point. I was a bit disappointed that it didn't work a lot better on the track even after all this work. The chassis didn't run too badly on the track, but it still needed quite a bit of power, something like 2/3 power from the duet controller, to get it to move at a decent speed. Well, I've now done pretty much everything I can in the way of servicing this. This is the chassis from the Duchess of Atholl, and it's not in bad shape so far as I can see. There was a lot of dirt on the bottom. There was, especially inside the wheels and whatever, there was lots of crud, and that was one of the major problems. That was stopping power getting from the wheels to the chassis. I took it up to Nigel of British Model Trains, and he remagnetized it with his Dodds magnetizer. I don't have one, but he does, so he remagnetized it. It actually had a fairly strong magnet even before, but it has a very strong magnet now. And I've done everything I can cleaning. I've cleaned the commutator and the brushes and oiled everything, oiled the bearings. The bearing for the motor is adjusted properly. It's got a nice little bit of play in it when it's cold, but not too much. I did file the ends of the brushes, so they're sort of having to wear in a bit again now. You might even see, I don't know, you can see there's a fair amount of sparking between the brushes and the commutator, although that will die down a bit as the brushes wear in. And it is going a little bit faster now. I was a bit disappointed to find that after all the servicing work I'd done, it didn't really go initially any better on the layout than it was going before. I had to give it 90% power or whatever to get it to go at all. It's now down to, well, there aren't really percent markings on the clipper. I'm using the clipper there, but it's now, the maximum on the clipper is 6, and that's at 4, so it's at 2/3 power. And I suppose that's not so bad for an old engine, and I think it is gradually building up a bit more speed even now. I've done my best to clean these tracks very thoroughly with the 600 grit, very fine emery paper on a wood block, so I think the tracks are pretty clean now. I'm not saying they're in perfect condition otherwise. Especially that joint he just went over, for some reason, seems a bit bumpy. Although it's not because the fish plates aren't in the right position. They are. I checked them. It just doesn't seem to join very flat for some reason. Maybe the rails are a little bent or something. So anyway, there he is without his body. We'll put his body. I'm kind of running him in after servicing now is effectively what I'm doing. I'm not going to give him a full run in, but give him at least a quarter of an hour, I think, in each direction to run in. If anything, he seems to go a bit better backwards maybe than forwards, and he does seem to be going a little bit faster now as he runs in, so we'll see. Hopefully we'll get him working fairly decently. One thing that I hadn't done was to lubricate all of the pivot points of the motion, so I did that now. The tender drawbar is on upside down here. No, it isn't on at all. No, here.
the tender drawbar is on upside down. I only realised that when I tried to run the loco with the tender, and it wouldn't run this way, derailing the tender because the drawbar wasn't pivoting properly. The big grotty-looking thing is the radio interference suppressor. That is a capacitor. I'm not sure if I should be worrying how bad it looks. Just above the left end of that capacitor is a little square nut, which is what holds on the bogey. The bolt goes in and has to go into that nut. So you basically can't attach the bogey when the body's on. That's why I had to take the body back off again. You have to attach the bogey to the chassis before the body's on so you can hold that square nut in position and then put the body on. With the body on and the tender in tow, the model still took a lot of power to operate, somewhat to my disappointment. Of course, it would probably help if I did some more work on the track to improve its connectivity and level connection, etc. The loco model doesn't run too badly now, but it does need a lot of power compared to modern models, but perhaps that's fairly normal. At this point I felt that I'd done pretty much all that I could in the way of servicing this loco, so I ran it for a bit and then tried to hook it up to the coaches. Well, I have to say I'm a little disappointed because for all my efforts getting it remagnetized and fully servicing it and lubricating it, it don't really go any better than when I started, particularly. Well, maybe a little bit, you know. I can maybe get it to go at 80% power instead of 90%, but that's about it. It still needs, 80% with the body on and the tender and whatever. It still needs about 80% power to go. And it's not going very fast then. I mean, if I cranked it up to 100% power, it would go a bit faster. It's just all the bits of the mechanism and things, I think. The motor goes fine. If you just run the motor by applying power directly to the motor now, the motor works absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with the motor and everything's duly lubricated, but whatever. I'm going to try it with the coaches. I've tried the wheels of the coaches seem to run okay, so we'll just give it a little run with the coaches. And I think we'll consider this train set up then. It's a very old train set and it's nice to see it running again. I'm a little disappointed I couldn't get the loco running a bit better than this though. This is with a Hammond & Morgan Duet controller running with about 80% power. Well, I wasn't anticipating problems with the coaches, but as you can gather from that, I'm having problems with the coaches. I just could not get the... we're going to have to give it a little more power, aren't we? I just couldn't get the composite coach. That's the composite coach that came with the train set there, but I just couldn't get it to run on this track. It's too picky. This track's not level enough for it. It just kept derailing going around the curve, so I've cheated it for the moment. I'm using one of the LMS coaches. These are three-rail LMS coaches, but that one at the front there, we're really slowing down there, I guess, because the contact between the tracks isn't as good as it should be, so we're losing power around there. This track is as flat as I can make it. I've done everything I can to flatten it as much as I can. The tabletop's perfectly flat, and the track's as flat as I can make it, but I could not get that coach to run around the curves without its back bogey derailing. So the coach that's on the back coach is the one that came with the train set here. That brake coach, but the middle coach is one of the LMS three-rail coaches that I re-wheeled. That one in fact has markets and 14mm bright wheels on it. I had to bend its coupling down a little bit more to make it couple with the loco tender, but now it's running. So we've sort of got the Duchess of Atholl train set running, except it's not really running. It's not running very fast. I'm giving it a little bit more power here, but I don't want it to go too fast because I'm afraid it'll derail the coaches if it goes too fast. but it definitely slows down around the back corner there as it gets further away. So we've sort of got the Duchess of Atholl train set running, except we're cheating a little bit because the front coach is actually a replacement that I've re-wheeled. I thought I'd lost a coach there for a minute, but I was only ever running with 2 coaches, not 3, so... yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just couldn't get that other one to run. It just kept derailing every time it went round the end, and I've got the track as flat as I can, so I don't know. I don't even have any new wheels to put on that. I mean, it should work with its own wheels, but I can't get it to. Anyway, I think that's as far as I'm taking it for right now. I'm actually planning to take the table apart again, and I've got some thicker foam I'm going to put underneath this matting to level it out even more, hopefully, or keep it better level, because I think it's tending to sag a little bit round the front there, which may be contributing to the problem. But there you go. So we have got sort of the old Duchess of Atholl train set running, such as it is, but except I had to cheat on one of the coaches. It's just fortunate really that I had other coaches. I'm trying to reach the power here. I think we'll turn the power off now. So there we go for now. The LMS Duchess of Atholl train set from, oh, I don't know, was released in 1947 originally. This is probably not from its first year, but it's pretty early on, from somewhere in the vicinity of 1950. Probably it doesn't have the horseshoe magnet, but it does have the, what they call the cast lug error. You can even see that. It has a lug on the side of the engine there where it should really have a groove, which is apparently an error Hornby made at some point and then corrected. Don't know the exact history of that. I did not buy it specifically because I wanted that. But so more work to do for sure, but we do have at least our first little 3-rail train running. Well, I had another go at the composite coach that came with the train set. I cleaned its wheels, and then when I was cleaning them I realised that some of the stuff just wouldn't come off, and it wasn't in fact dirt at all. It was actually burrs in the metal of the wheels, so I had to file that, because it was actually burrs in the casting of the metal of the wheels. So I cleaned the wheels as much as I could, oiled the axles, oiled the pivots of the couplings, and re-gauged one of the axles. They were mostly, seemed quite reasonable, about 14.2, but one of them was only about 13.9, so I increased it out to 14.1, 14.2, something like the others. I still couldn't get that coach to run one way round, but I've turned it round and it does seem to be running now the other way round. It's just running, it's running with what used to be the back bogie that kept derailing at the front. Obviously these things haven't been run much together. Also, I couldn't get it, it wouldn't even couple to the loco because the couplings were at different heights. I had to adjust the height of the couplings to get it to even couple to the tender that way round. Just bend, you know, they're just the metal couplings, so you can at least bend them a little bit. It's not much you can do with the plastic ones if they're not at the right height. You're just out of luck. But the metal ones, you know, you can bend to get them at the right height and the right angle and whatever, and it's not a bad idea to do so, because if they're not at the same height and angle and whatever, they won't couple together properly. Anyway, so there you go. A slight improvement. This is the actual train set itself. Those are the three other LMS coaches that I had before that I converted the wheels on. But this is the actual train set that I received running now. The only thing that I'm not using is the power controller that came in it, because I couldn't really use it. It's an ancient power controller and it's designed to work off a transformer I don't have anyway, and so I'm using the Hamilton Morgan Duet. But other than that, other than the, I'm going to try and stop him now. Oh, reaching. I don't have a you know, a hands-free controller for this one like I do on the Morley, so I have to reach down to the Hamilton Morgan Duet underneath the board to get at it. But there you go. So We did finally get the train set as it came, the Duchess of Atholl train set from somewhere around 1950 or so. So probably just slightly older than me, or about the same age, to run properly. And, well, there's a lot more of the stuff, this three-rail stuff coming. I want to improve the surface of the top of this table, and then I'm going to clean up. I've got a bunch more track. I've got to work on cleaning it up and straightening it and whatever, and then we'll lay some more track and look at some more rolling stock. And I've got a few little Hornby Dublo, I hesitate to say scenic items, but whatever you want to call them, accessory items like stations and things as well, which are ultimately going to go on here. Just a tabletop railway, not a real landscape layout, but one step at a time. There's the Duchess of Atholl, my first three-rail train set actually running.